The concept of critical race theory, CRT, has been banned in U.S. classrooms in at least 8 states. But if history isn't being taught, how can this country address major issues like voting rights or police reform or disparities in education and health care? Dr. Rashawn Ray is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and he is back with us. And Rashawn, CRT is not being, it's only being taught on the collegiate level. They banned it in Virginia, but it wasn't being taught. Is this just a political weapon for the right wing or a real problem in our society?
Look, it is a political weapon. So my colleague at Brookings and I, Alexandra Gibbons, we did a large analysis of critical race theory legislation that had been passed and had been proposed across the United States. What we found was that a majority of those bills, and when I say a majority, I mean an overwhelming majority, never exclusively even mentioned the term critical race theory. Instead, what these bills focused on was diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and also extended beyond just race, but to include gender, sexual orientation, and other forms of difference that is simply important for people to know about. So part of this is definitely a witch hunt. The way that I like to call critical race theory, I frame it as the boogeyman. And part of what we're seeing in this thriving for this is that just a majority of people, particularly some white parents, simply do not want their children to have to discuss race because honestly, for some of them and their grandparents, they were the ones blocking some of their Black classmates from even having the opportunity to be in class with them to begin with.
Dr. Ray, a lot of what they are teaching, though, or want to be returned to the textbooks is just flat out wrong. I remember as a little kid being taught the poem in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America. He didn't. He kind of missed it by a few hundred miles and discovered what we now know as St. Kitts. But what is wrong with correcting the wrongs of history? And how did we get to this point where we started making things up and calling them history? Lewis and Clark, Mount Everest, all the things that we once believed to be fact wound up being fiction. Livingston in places like the Congo wasn't a great explorer. He was a butcher.
Yeah, so look, if we correct the inaccuracies that people are learning, then now we have to atone for the truth. And that is one of the things that the United States of America has never wanted to do, particularly when it comes to Black Americans. And of course, that atonement is thinking about restitution and is thinking about reparations. The United States of America is not against reparations. We've seen it for Japanese Americans who were interned. We've seen it for Native Americans. The United States even played a strong role in ensuring that Jews and other individuals who were persecuted from the Holocaust in Germany and throughout Europe got their reparations. So the only people that the United States is against getting reparations is Black people. And so part of that truth means that atonement process. I think the other thing that's important for people to recognize as a university professor, as you noted, I teach race. It's one of the courses among many that I teach. And critical race theory is just a small segment of the many theories that students are exposed to. In high schools and middle schools, and definitely in elementary schools, they're not being exposed to that at all. But instead of what's happening, and you talked about this earlier in the show, is that because of the backlash, because of so many people saying critical race theory, people want to know what it is. And look, in short, critical race theory is a theoretical framework that helps us to understand the way that social institutions can end up using racism to permeate our laws, our rules, our regulations, and our procedures. When we say social institutions, we mean the labor market, we mean education, we mean healthcare, the criminal justice system. And so part of this is simply a framework to understand it. Critical race theory is being weaponized, it's being used as a political tool, it's being used as a way to racially divide people. And that's unfortunate because students, regardless of race, but particularly my white students who learn about it, they say, this makes so much sense to understand America.
And a reminder that the vast majority of children being born in this country, according to the census as of last year, are biracial. So what does a Black parent tell a white child that has a white mother or a Black child that has a Black mother about race and things in classes that just don't make sense? Dr. Rashawn Ray is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Ray, thanks for being with us. Stay with us.